So decided to get out the camera. Usually I've been recording everything on my phone because it's more convenient, and I just had a lot of other things going on in my life, so that the quality of my videos, the production values were not really so much something that I wanted to worry about. I just sort of wanted to have the the format of recording myself, essentially, to achieve, there's several different things that talking to a camera for me achieves. Helps me become a better speaker. So anything that is going to make me a better speaker is going to help me be more social, or have more of a tool available to me if I want to be social, if I choose to be. It's like one thing to want something and not have the tools available to do it. It's another thing to have the tools available and then decide whether or not you actually want to do the thing that in question. So it's there's a lot of on the one hands, on the other hands with socializing for me. It's because it's often there's multiple desires that are attached to they're entangled, and so in the case of socializing, it's you could want several things at the same time, and then within that wanting, on the face of it, you could just say broadly, I want to socialize, but within that cocktail of what is the sort of thing that the mind grabs onto as okay, this is what I want, there can be a whole bunch of other desires that are that are all trying, you're trying to get everything, you're trying to achieve a lot of things at once, with by achieving this one desire. And so it's kind of interesting because sometimes the desire that we go for, that is the surface level desire, that is more conscious in our, that we're more consciously aware of in our mind, because it's sort of acceptable to us. By doing things that sort of bring us closer to the fulfillment of that desire, in the process of going for the things that we want in life, we often achieve other things as a consequence. And then, the thing that we're really left with oftentimes, when we've achieved our desire, is that, sort of what we've learned along the way. Because, for example, if you want a relationship, it's okay, now I have a relationship. And most of us, we've wanted relationships. We did all sorts of things to achieve a relationship. And then, we have the relationship and something, happens and it doesn't work out. And so, what's interesting here is that, the thing that we wanted ended up being more temporary than we, sort of reckoned with. And then the thing that we're left with more permanently is the sort of the skills, the talents, and the experience that we developed in order to achieve the goal. And, within that, we get a greater sort of knowing of ourselves. And, that's a very, that can be a very rewarding thing. And, but it's also kind of confusing, because it's like, I wanted this thing. I did all these things and I grew as a person in order to achieve it. Now I have it and now I no longer want it. Because, we sort of like, often, sort of like what we want is not so much the thing itself. We sort of want the ideal, like, and the ideal is more sort of real. It's more real in conception than it is in reality. It's like you can achieve something close to the ideal in the material world, but the thing that you really want is something on the inside, like something on the inside that is, like a permanence. And a lot of times, it's like, I'm sort of waffling over here, but so I'll go back to what I started with. There's a lot of, like on the face of it, sometimes we want, like we want to socialize more, and then there's like a lot of different components that are, go into socializing, and then there's like different desires that are sort of attached to socializing that may not actually have anything to do with socializing. Like it's like you may want to socialize, but then you want some other property that is sort of goes with socializing, that, it's like coupled together, and you think, okay, well, to get this other thing I need to socialize, And so, I'll try to list some sort of different desires. And, I think I'll try to go to some of the more root desires so that I'm less vague about, what it is that I'm talking about here. So, intimacy. Okay, that's one desire. Then a relationship, that's another desire. Then sex, that's another desire. And money, that's another desire. Now, person can want each one of these things separately, and yet most of us, we connect our desires to something else to make it palatable to our, it's sort of like what our conscience has been trained to think of as appropriate. And so, this is sort of like where our shadow does a good job of hiding, like, what is motivating us in a certain circumstance. So like, for example, you could want money to be a more, appealing partner in a relationship. Like, you want the money to, have to be more appealing and to, draw a mate, because, you have the money. Well, now you have a better resume for relationships. So, but it's like you want the money for other reasons as well. And you want the relationship, for, its own sake. So then if you have like a problem with one or the other, like if some part of you doesn't really want the money or doesn't really want the relationship, if you have these two things connected as a desire, then whenever you go for one, you'll sort of undermine the other. And sort of until you like work out and uncouple each desire from each other, you won't really be able to get underneath what it is that you really want. And then you'll have a hard time really like creating either one, because you'll be like in conflict with yourself. Because if you want, a relationship, for example, there's a lot of components into like, why does a person want a relationship, Some people want just somebody around to make them more comfortable, that they're not alone. That would be one reason. Another one would be for, some kind of security that, that person provides. Another would be, to share intimate thoughts and have interesting conversations. And, then another would be, sexuality. You want to explore sexuality. And so relationships and money are very, they're like very pregnant, and there's a lot of ethics, that we learn that sort of force us to make compromises in, what it is that we really want, and it makes us feel ashamed of wanting something unless it's in a certain context. And so, like when we go for the relationship and, let's say, what we really want to do is have sex. But, we say to ourselves, well, a good person doesn't, they don't go for sex unless they want a relationship. So now you're kind of like, you're creating a problem for both, because you could both want both. But if you make these two things sort of contingent upon each other, now you like, it makes you overlook if you have a problem with, either one of them separately, and that makes it, harder to achieve either one. And so if we can sort of like allow ourselves to like really look at the different things that go into like the more loaded desires that we have, then we realize, oh, this is not just one desire. This is like fucking 20 desires. And I have to like sort of be really honest with myself about, okay, well, how much do I want all of these things when they're not sort of interlinked with other things that makes me feel more okay with wanting that thing. And then it also makes you look at, okay, where is my like shame about this desire? Where is the thing that I have about this desire separately, in its own category, that I don't really want? Like, because you may think, well, a relationship might mean, like now I have to like listen to someone when I don't want to listen to them. I'm going to, have to have sex with them when I'm not in the mood to have sex with them. I'm going to, have to like get a job that makes a lot of money and I don't really fucking want to do that. And, so it's like all these things that, are like contras to the desire that you have, they sort of need to be looked at. And so if you have them all sort of bundled together so that you can like swallow the fucking whole thing, then it becomes very difficult to really manifest, I think, the greater thing that you're really looking for, because you haven't really resolved the things that are around the subject, because you've, clumped them too tightly together not out of a sense of genuine desire for a thing, but because you feel somehow there's no way that it's inconceivable that you could have what you want in its own category, and then that does not prevent you from having the other thing. But it's important that you sort of allow each desire its separate breathing room without like getting too, morally judgmental about, like, well, because then you're not really, then you start lying, because you bring morality into it, and now you like start lying to yourself, and you start lying to the people that you want to attract into your life, because it's like, you're afraid that they will not reciprocate because you haven't packaged yourself well. And so like if the only, if you want one thing, but you're right now you're more in a place where you're like wanting something else, or something else is like there's more of an issue around it, so it's more important for you to sort of like work on that thing, so then the other things sort of like kind of need to be put a little bit more in the distance, because we can only, it's better when we put our full attention on sort of one desire at a time and, work that out. Then it, becomes less confusing when you like start engaging, I think, with other people, because you're more clear about where your attention is right now and like what particular sort of emotional sort of problem that you're, trying to solve. Because, what are desires? Desires are like emotional problems, essentially. They're like, desire is kind of like pain, it's like it's there to remind you that there is something that is like a question mark about yourself. that like until you receive this thing, then you feel kind of like incomplete, and like your self-esteem is kind of like, well, can I really have what I want and be a good person, you know? And, and then, so then to like kind of go back to the other thing is a lot of times, what we learn along the way when we sort of wrestle with our desires is, we become more competent and we gain more self-awareness. And then we sort of like begin to make more peace with what it is that we want, because we know that we can get it once we become consolidated within ourselves. And, we've, sort of learned the skills, and we know it now. We know that we can apply these skills reliably in order to achieve what we want. So then, then the wanting becomes less painful, because you know that, if the circumstance arises that you did like want something, then then it's already yours, essentially. But a lot of times we don't like fully admit to ourselves why we don't want, what we want. And that's sort of like where we like go out of, we take things out of focus, and then we end up with sort of like very temporary solutions to the more permanent problem of, life. And, it's like where we use all sorts of things for escapism purposes, and, and in doing that, we are never really fully developing our skills. And it's really like, it's in our confidence in our skills that once we are okay with what we want, and, sort of fully like develop our creativity and see like what can I actually deploy, with my, what skills are even like that I have access to that I didn't even know, like, because a lot of people are capable of things that they wouldn't really know unless they had a desire. And so like it's very, it's like the desire is like the painful parts. And then, like, then if they really want the thing, then they have to really start looking at themselves and really think about like, well, okay, how do I get from here to there, and what is standing in my way? And then it's like, a lot of us like want to look at the external world and say, well, the material world is standing in my way. But usually the more truth thing is like it's your internal decisions that you've made about yourself that are really the things that are standing in the way. And once you remove those, then you can be like any successful person in the world. Because if you really put yourself to a problem earnestly and you really pay attention to it, then the answers will come, But it's like a very, it requires a lot of patience and a high tolerance for some very uncomfortable feelings that may arise, because, there's things in us that we really would rather not look at on our way to our desires. But then, like when we've fully developed our tools, then we can, sort of be okay in whatever situation we are, because we know like it's already in principle, it's already mine, because it's like I have the skills to get it. So it's more like the skills are more like sort of the thing that gives you the satisfaction and the like feeling of security and safety, and sort of like the thing that makes you feel at peace, that okay, I've done the thing that I have, I've done the thing, I can do it again, and now I can do it more reliably, and now I can really look more, even more, I can be a little even more picky in how I want to manifest what I want to manifest. And so, this is like, I think there's like like um, a fable about like a fox or something. And, he like sees a squirrel in a tree, and he's like really hungry, but he says, like, well, there's no conceivable way for him to like climb that tree and get that squirrel. So he's like, well, I don't want that squirrel, like that's not, like what I want anyway. So, and that's sort of like another like thing that we do as humans is like when we don't really have the patience to really become creative and really look at how, like how to really make peace with what we want. We just say, oh, well, I don't want that, um, okay, I don't want that. Okay, now I'm going to like turn on the TV and like just watch, whatever kind of show to distract myself so that I don't, have to be reminded that there's things that I want that I'm not putting my creative attention on to achieve. So, yeah, basically, yeah, I'm glad I did this talk. I'm just always feel better when I've expressed something, even if I'm not really sure what I'm going to say, which, like I had several ideas in my head today as, I was sort of like in the process of driving around, and I was like, well, what am I going to talk about? I don't know if I have these things fully fleshed out, but it's always sort of interesting to me how like once I start talking, like things come out, and that's really, so like that's really what I'm looking for with this is like developing my confidence with speaking, and then having that available as something that I can put under my belt as I have this skill now, and I can like communicate my thoughts, and I may not have anyone necessarily to talk to about them all the time the way that I want to, but if I wanted to, you know like I have that skill available to me. So that's sort of like one example of why why do we do things, why do we develop skills? It's it's so that we have the confidence that we can deploy them when we want to, and it like gives us a greater range of like really being able to look at like, okay, well, what is it that I want to achieve with this now? Like I have this component. Now there's several things that I could do with it, because, it's like not usually, because like one thing doesn't always necessarily lead to another. One thing could lead to a whole branch of, you could go in so many different directions with just one thing. And then, so like, that can be overwhelming too. It's like, oh, fuck, what do I want now? I could do so many things. Which one of these seems most, it's like, like opportunity cost now comes into play, because it's like, well, my lifespan is like this long, like, and I can, only sort of focus on one thing at a time to really like get the real, like, because like when you when you go to Disneyland, like you really want to fully experience Disneyland before you go on to the Grand Canyon. You don't want to be thinking about either one. When you're in the when you're in the place that you're at, that's like where you want to like be. But if you're like going into Disneyland, you're like, well, like these roller coasters are kind of nice, but like I'm also like I just want to be in the Grand Canyon right now, and that's cool. So then it's like you're in the Grand Canyon, and you're like having thinking about roller coasters. So yeah, that's like you need to be in the place that you are, And, you know, like once we like develop the skills that we have, that like opens up opportunities in several directions. And then it's like, well, which one of these do I want to focus on right now to, you know, which one of these paths do I want to go? Or do I just like want to like relax and just like, you know, be abstract and meditate and, you know, not think about things too much, you know, or maybe do I just need to rest, you know, like maybe I'm just fucking exhausted and I just can't, maybe I don't need to achieve anything right now. You know, maybe I just, you know, I've learned this skill and it's like now I can kind of like take a break and be like, hey, you know, what I really want to do right now is not think about having to do anything. And that, you know, and then within that, you know, like energy builds up. And then, you know, before you even know it, you're like involved in some other activity and you're like, oh, well, when did I decide that like I was going to do this? And it's like, okay, you just need some rest to, you know, figure out what your next step was going to be. And so, yeah, I don't know. Like my life has been very stressful for the last 38 years, I would say. Yeah, and I think like one of the things that I really, you know, really want underneath of a lot of it is just to rest and to feel like I'm in a place where I can just be like, okay, let's see what is available, you know, like what can I do with this man whose body I'm in, and, you know, what does he really want to do with his life, and can I be okay with if, you know, like if it turns out that I don't want to do anything with my life that will be remembered or valuable to anyone else, can I just like be okay with me for a while to just be someone, you know, who may not be remembered or wasn't important in any, you know, particular way, but that I could still sort of love this person that I experienced in this life. So, yeah, and that's like kind of nice sometimes just to be able to be like, okay, I'm me. I'm not going anywhere. You know, life is going by and, you know, there are things that I want, but also I kind of just need to be okay with, you know, what I am and to be okay to recharge and relax. So anyhow, just some thoughts. I'll leave it here. Have a good one.